Welcome into another edition of the Old North State Sports Show, folks. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Appreciate folks that are calling into the show. Again, 910-679-6927. Leave a message. I'll get to those on a weekly basis until hopefully we just have too many calls that I can't handle it. And as you guys know, we're also going to be adding those to the live stream. But we're here again today. And folks, we're giving you a Panthers update, but don't worry. College football update is coming later as well, so stay tuned. But for the Carolina Panthers, we have to talk about Dane Jackson getting cut. Folks, if you tuned in to me, if you paid attention, I said this was coming. We're also going to talk about some other guys that may be on the cutting block as well. Andy Dalton, we've got his contract details. We'll talk about what that means in his future for the Carolina Panthers. Of course, we got to give you an update on salary cap based off of where we sit today with all these changes. And then Netflix and chill coming to Sunday afternoon football, the implications of what this means as a fan. But without further ado, folks, let's go ahead and jump right in. Starting out with the news that Dane Jackson has been cut by the Carolina Panthers. To be honest, if you have followed this team, this was not a surprise. We saw this coming. And maybe it was his fault, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. There were high expectations for him coming into this season last year. You have the connection to Dan Morgan. There were also concerns, though. We knew he wasn't really a reliable starter. We know he filled in a little bit. We know that Dan Morgan liked him, but he had some injuries. He had setbacks. A lot of folks thought he was going to be the corner opposite J.C. Horn. When he finally was healthy and out there, he just didn't perform well. And folks, it was just the writing on the wall. We knew this day was coming, so I wouldn't look at it as a shocker. Now the Carolina Panthers, the cornerback room, extremely thin. Still a decision to be made about J.C. Horn and his future, his contract. Can we get an extension? I hope so. Are we going to bring back Mike Jackson? Or are we going to do a full overhaul on the defense, which that could also be a possibility. And speaking of overhauls on the defensive side of the ball, I'll also plug, I've got another video coming out where we rebuild the Carolina Panthers defense through free agency, because I do think that's the path for the Panthers. Gives them an opportunity to draft a really good wide receiver and or tight end early. I think that's what we're going to do, but we'll get into that. But for now, let's talk about Andy Dalton and his contract. Again, signed that extension. There was a few things that were beneficial for this. For those folks who don't know, Andy Dalton's contract for this year was going to be voided, so it would have been dead money. They get this thing restructured, and it all makes sense for everyone involved. So he's going to be here the next 2 years. They did add a voided year on at the end. So in 2027, when he turns 40, and that's really when he said he wanted to play football until he retired around 40, there's going to be about $1.8 million dead money hit. I think that's okay. But he's going to be the backup here for the next 2 years. We saw what he did this past season. I think it makes sense for everyone involved. You just keep continuity in the locker room. You keep it in the quarterback room. And you have someone, if needed, kind of that Anderson backup role when Cam Newton was here that could fill in, win you some games if you have to, call on him, which hopefully you don't. So makes sense. I mean, you look at this year, it's a $3.2 million hit. 5.8 next year, and again, the 1.8 with the voided year in 2027. But by that point, I mean, contract, salary cap, all those things likely going to continue to increase. That is, of course, unless the NFL just keeps getting too greedy and eventually things plummet and drop like they have in the NBA. Ratings, I don't know. Speaking of contracts and discussions, folks, again, we're 2.5, 3 weeks away from free agency. I mean, it's right around the corner. We're starting to see some guys signed, other teams making decisions on cutting players because you have roster bonuses the new league year. One in particular, some news that came through was around Austin Corbett. Remember, the center, he's had some setbacks, ACL at the end of the, 23 season last year, the bicep injury. So the Panthers have pushed back his void deadline until March 11th. So that is like bumping up right at the new league year, which starts on March 12th. This was reported initially by Over the Cap. Of course, you can see Mike K here. Pushback gives Carolina and Corbett more time to negotiate a new deal. While it doesn't guarantee anything, a new contract also helps saves the Panthers cap space before the new league year. So something worth monitoring. And I agree. Now, I know when I look at this, I think probably just my guess, the Panthers going to bring back Cade Mays and Austin Corbett if they can work out numbers wise. Unfortunately, folks, I think Brady Christensen is gone. And I think for your center position, it really is those two. You also have Andrew Rain on the practice squad, a guy that I talked about last year going into training camp as the only true center that we had at the time. He was actually doing well, made some cuts, was actually progressing, and then had a concussion during practice, and that set him back. So I like the depth there. It also gives the Panthers another year or two, especially if you can get something with Cade Mays. They not have to worry about center. And I personally like what we saw between Mays as well as Austin Corbett. Now, understand concerns with Austin Corbett because of the injury history, and maybe you're like, I don't know that we necessarily want to bring a guy that's injury prone. And I think it's okay to say he's injury prone. Very different injuries, different circumstances, but still, if you miss playing time and you keep getting injured, people are going to give you that label. So I understand it from both sides of fans that like it, as well as fans that are like, let's get this out of here. Like, I don't want to see it at all. Now, additional cuts. Who else could be on the cutting block? I think there's really two players in particular that I've talked about that I still think there's a possibility the Panthers could make a decision. One of them, right out of the gate, that seems like the next in the order would be Shai Tuttle. You can see here if they make, and I'm looking at the post June 1st designation. Remember, Panthers can designate two players post June 1st. Doesn't mean they actually cut them June 1st. Like, they can cut them now and designate this. So they would save roughly $6.5 million with Shai Tuttle. I think the other on the list that we'll continue to monitor, of course, is Miles Sanders at $6.7 million. Those are the two. Now, if I was to throw a curveball in this situation, I don't necessarily think this is the case, but Jadeveon Clowney, a little bit older. I'm not saying they should, but I'm just, as we track possible money saving, if they want to get younger, if they want to go out and get a Sweat or someone else and invest heavily on the defense, they could look there. Or same thing with DJ Wonnum. He's a $7 million man. So that's my initial thought. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do like to give folks my ideas because I tend to feel pretty confident about, the direction and, just seeing performance as well as contracts and stacking those up. Been doing this for 2 years. So I like to share the knowledge that I have with you guys. And lastly, of course, we're going to look at the current cap total for the Carolina Panthers right now. So based on the news that we've gotten so far, team cap space sits at $28 million. That's the rough number right now. Still some work to do, but hey, again, it's not a big splash. Next year is really the year the Carolina Panthers are going to have room to work. Very important to get the defense right this year, to give Bryce weapons, because assuming, and folks are worried about paying Bryce Young, assuming Bryce Young continues to develop and does become I want to say top 15 quarterback, ideally top 10, but when you start stacking rankings, maybe he doesn't get into the top 10 list yet. But I think trending in that direction, you're going to have to pay him. And so go ahead, get everything else established around him so you have the ability to do so. And hopefully the cap numbers too will continue to adjust. We'll close out today's episode with some, what I'll say is pretty interesting news. And maybe you don't care, or maybe you do. Recent comments from Netflix's chief content officer have opened up Pandora's box on the possibility of Netflix trying to nab a Sunday afternoon package from CBS or Fox. What is Netflix's goal? Bigger than that? Is it bigger than that? So the only reason I bring this up, we've seen the Netflix Christmas Day, we've seen Peacock, we've seen, I don't even know, Amazon Prime, all these streaming services. Those services, Thursday Night Football, you think about those, that's like a one-night thing. Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, but typically Monday night and Sunday night are, through your traditional channels. ESPN, I know, is a premium service, but NBC for Sunday Night Football. When we start branching over into packages, You're now taking away what we considered free football for our entire lives on Fox and CBS, like your Sunday afternoon games, 1 o'clock window, 4 o'clock window, whatever it is, having to pay for those. And I think this would just be the first step in the greed. And I don't know that it's a good thing because personally, where I am, and I know I may not speak for everyone because my fandom's a little bit different. When I look at me as a fan, I'm not going to go out and buy the 50 streaming services to watch sports. I'll watch whatever I can watch, whatever is available to me, but I'm not going out of my way. And I don't know how many diehard NFL fans, and maybe there's a good portion still, considering how much the cap keeps going up, the revenues. I don't know. You have ESPN also cutting ties with Major League Baseball, mutually parting ways there. So going all in. But you look at the NFL talking about adding additional games, the expansion that's happening there, the overseas, all these things. And like, I think they're just going to continue to suck out as much as they can until the fans either stop showing up or stop watching or stop buying the services. We've seen drops in NBA numbers. I think that's a different conversation. But I still think when you analyze this thing, like this is the first step because you do it with one package. Then you're like, okay, well, we can do it with that. Let's do it for another. Let's add, do this for the Super Bowl. Let's do it. Like, I just think it's opening it up. And you know what? They're going to continue to do it because that's where people get paid. It's how they get their money. They clearly, at least to this point, said, hey, you know what? We think this is going to work. We'll continue to force it this way. So I don't know. And maybe there's more eyeballs on Netflix versus a traditional cable package. It could be that. And so you say, well, let's go ahead and put it there. And they're also going to give us $50 billion. I don't know. I'm making some random number, 700 million, whatever it is, crazy, just to get 2 to 3 games or a game every Sunday afternoon. And you also think about from a marketing perspective, if Netflix does have an afternoon slot and it's available to everyone nationwide, it's a little bit different than your regional coverage. So I don't know how many people, you look at the map of Fox and CBS, you can see regionally where in market you're going to see the games. Of course, I know there's, whatever the NFL red zone and the packages you can buy to get out of market games, but on local TV. And so this kind of changes the game because it now becomes a national game on Netflix that you can watch. Everyone has eyeballs, more revenue because you're like, oh, this is going to be available to anyone and everyone. It's a lot of money involved, and I'm not there to make the decisions on any of that. But I'm just here to tell you what I think the future is going to look like. So, anyways, folks, that's going to do it for today's episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We're not going to edit that out. I'm just going to have the typo, the word flub in there. Appreciate you guys tuning in. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.